I'm Robert Grant, and this is the Codex. I've had the opportunity over my lifetime to live in 9 different countries and visit over 140 different countries. I feel very blessed and lucky to have been able to see the world like that. In fact, I thought the best way to learn the cultures of those countries was to actually learn the languages. So I've learned 8 languages in my lifetime, and I speak 5 of them fluently today. Because of that view of looking at the world through the lens of language, I looked very differently at all the patterns in life that I would come across. This is true also for mathematics. And I started looking very differently at patterns in general. I would always see things that some of my colleagues that I worked with would never see in quite the same way. And I thought that was just sort of like a weird quinky-dink in how I saw the world a little bit differently. But when I went to Egypt and started traveling to all the ancient sites, I couldn't help but notice the numerous patterns that were left behind by the architects and builders in living stone. In 2019, I took a group of about 50 people to Egypt with me on a discovery mission. We went there following the encryptions left to us by Leonardo da Vinci, embedded inside the Vitruvian Man, as well as the La Belle Ferronnière, the portrait of Anne Boleyn, the mother of Queen Elizabeth I, as well as the Last Supper itself. We realized on that trip that the Last Supper was a working map of the king's chamber in the Great Pyramid of Giza. And we discovered while there 8 new stone reliefs. Another thing that we found was right underneath the chevrons at the original entrance of the Great Pyramid, in the basin, along with my colleague Alan Green, we found very ancient letters written into this altar basin. When asked later on what these letters might mean, they appeared to be some form of Proto-Hebraic, a language that is more of a phonetic language than hieroglyphics, that might actually point back to an earlier language likened unto Atlantean. You can see these letters as 4 symbols: a V, a circle with a horizontal line like the Greek letter theta, 3 lines that look like a Chinese character, and then 2 lines vertical in their position inscribed within a circle. These letters, we are told, by a researcher who originally found these letters, by the name of Robert Schoch, the very same geologist from Boston University who has dated the Sphinx to being much older than dynastic Egyptian times, that would point to a construction of the Giza Plateau, at least for the Sphinx, somewhere along the timeline of 2500 BC, actually showing that through water erosion, we can actually date the Sphinx back to something much older and probably closer to 10,000 years BC.
Robert Grant's discovery of the symbols first found by Dr. Robert Schoch, inscribed into the stone basin beneath the chevrons of the Great Pyramid, begs the question: what language has been left here, and what other enigmatic symbols are waiting to be discovered within the Great Pyramid that will shed light upon the mystery of the ages?
So we had the opportunity to spend 2 nights in the Great Pyramid, and I've actually spent 5 nights in total inside the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid at night is a magical place. Something about it speaks to you. As we look through history, the people that prominently spent the night inside the Great Pyramid are some notable figures. One of them was Julius Caesar. He was said to have spent the night in the Great Pyramid and came out of it in the next morning a changed person. Another person who spent the night in the Great Pyramid was Alexander the Great. And additionally, we have another person who was spending time inside the Great Pyramid that is closer to our day, and his name was Napoleon Bonaparte. But Napoleon was famous as well for having come up with different forms of geometric and mathematical discovery. In fact, there's something called the Napoleon or Bonaparte constant, and it was innovated entirely by Napoleon himself. In fact, before he was exiled to Helena and Elba, he was said to have been saying to his friends and relatives that his greatest dream would be to go and focus solely on mathematical and scientific discovery. What was it about spending the night in the Great Pyramid that had such an indelible impact on these three massive characters in our history? We know that the Last Supper has already yielded for us many things that we've shown on our prior episode. However, are there potentially more things hidden within the Last Supper that we can glean as another additional message that's been encrypted through time by Leonardo? One of the things that we cannot get out of our minds is this whole reference to Bull Mountain. The ancient name of the Great Pyramid was Bull Mountain, and the hieroglyphics of it are the chevrons. The chevrons, and of course the symbol of the Apis bull. Now the Apis bull is from another reference to the same story of Osiris and Osiris's eventual resurrection. Osiris had a fight with Set, and Set was able to defeat Osiris and cut him into 14 parts, and Leonardo's Vitruvian Man was likewise cut into 14 parts. As Leonardo cut him into 14 parts, we saw already that the placement of the horizontal lines that he placed on the torso and on the knees and then on the head, at the eyebrow line as well as the throat chakra line, is pointing to potentially new chambers in the Great Pyramid that have yet to be discovered. And are there other references to the bull and cow in the Last Supper? One of the things that we discovered inside the Great Pyramid was actually discovered by my wife, Susie. She came over and she said, "Hey, I think I found something on the north wall." Now, the west wall is what is the back wall, behind the sarcophagus. But if you're walking into the king's chamber and looking at it as if it is the Last Supper painting, it would be on the right side. Now, to put this into context, here we are in the king's chamber, famously devoid of any writing or imagery on the walls, and yet we're finding a 6.5 foot wide bull. And the reference of the hieroglyphic writing of the Great Pyramid is Bull Mountain. And Leonardo da Vinci references it in his letter to the lieutenant of the Devatdar of the Sultan of Cairo as Bull Mountain as well. And here on the north wall, we're finding a bull. As we looked at this photographic footage and film footage later, we noticed that not only was there a bull to be seen on the right wall, the north wall, but we also noticed around that bull is a larger cow. And this larger cow extends for, again, in total, about 8.5 feet from left to right. But as we look at this cow, we can't help but ask ourselves, what is going on and how could this have been missed? As we looked at the imagery as well from side footage, you can see how the markings of the cow and the bull are almost burned as if by some type of technology we don't know today, and left into the wall, albeit very clear for us to be able to see it. And I have seen these images before, but I never associated it with a bull or a cow. 8.5 feet wide. Now, this is not something that's small like the Alpha Omega, but is it potentially referencing us back to the selfsame images of the Alpha and Omega that we already discovered on the rim of the sarcophagus? Well, to understand that, we have to understand the story of the Apis bull.
The iconic Egyptian goddess Hathor was the mother of the Apis bull. She is often represented in Egyptian art and mythology as the Omega symbol. Most notably, when looking at Hathor's hair, the representation of the Omega symbol is clearly seen. Also of note, the Apis bull is represented by the letter A. hearkening us back once more to the ubiquitous Alpha and Omega symbols. We are told in the story of the Apis bull that he had to learn to sacrifice himself in order to merge back into his mother, Hathor. In essence, sacrificing his own ego to be reunited once again with universal consciousness for the greater good.
This process is also represented in Saqqara, and it also relates back to the same process that Osiris had to go through when Isis, his wife, put him back together again, such that he could be fully resurrected. And the symbology from a Hermetic perspective, an esoteric standpoint, is that the Great Pyramid represents the place for the Apis bull to allow his ego to die and for him to be re-risen, to rise again in resurrection in the sarcophagus as a new superconscious being. This is symbology that you'll find in many places in Egypt. It is directly linked to the same story of Osiris, and this Apis bull is representative of that same experience. So then that begs the question, well, wait a minute. If we have a bull and a cow on the right wall or north wall of the king's chamber, perhaps is there a bull and cow somehow hidden in the right wall of the Last Supper by Leonardo da Vinci? If we zoom in on this fresco in Milan yet again, and we notice that the tapestries hanging on the right wall are actually embedding within them a hidden pattern of a cow. The two horns are very prominent, and you can even see the nostrils and the ridge of this cow's back extending through the white section of the painted wall, and then into the tapestry that is next to it. So this would be the far tapestries on the right side, starting with the farthest one, going to the middle one. We also noted that at the top of these tapestries seemed to be writings. We didn't know exactly what those writings were, but we could faintly make out that on the middle tapestry at the very top are the numbers 2, 4, and 6. We noticed clearly the image of a cow embedded and hidden within this tapestry and the adjacent tapestry and the wall structure. But what about the bull inside? Is there another cow or bull hidden within this larger cow that we see? And as we get closer and closer into the white section in between, we can very clearly notice the image of a bull with a Taurus symbol right in the center of its forehead. This is exactly matching in the same location on the right north wall of the king's chamber, in the same position in both the painting and on the wall of the king's chamber, a very large cow and bull encrypted right into the wall.